Wednesday, Bishop on Air, back at it another morning, and good morning to all those jumping into the chat room live, from Sean to JM3, Tattooed Squirrel, David, John, till Valhalla, Johnny. There's a lot of Johns and Johnnies up in this piece. Brian, Christopher, appreciate you guys. Good morning. All right. A lot going on, as always. You've got the Illinois legislature seemingly in full swing. Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson is going to be visiting with them to talk about a host of things. Maybe more money for education in Chicago from Illinois taxpayers, more money for transit in Chicago for Illinois taxpayers, or maybe money from Illinois taxpayers to fund a Chicago Bears stadium. So we'll see what he does there. You've also got more discussions about what they're going to ultimately accomplish at the State House. And we'll keep an eye on all of that. But, of course, go to thecentersquare.com. Again, thecentersquare.com. You'll see stories not just from Illinois, but you can go check out all kinds of other states as well, depending on where you're at and what's happening in your state. So, appreciate you. Ray says, Mr. Bishop, my eyes and ears for Illinois legislature. Keep up the great work. No, I appreciate that. It's a lot. And these next few weeks are going to be pretty tumultuous with a lot of things popping off here and there. But before the end of session, which they have scheduled May 24th to adjourn, they have to get a budget together. And that could include, you know, the deal with the Bears. We'll see what happens in that regard. But you could also see possible gun legislation come up. There's a push from gun control advocates for Karina's bill, which would require police to confiscate firearms from people with a order of protection against them. That's stalled right now in committees and really hasn't advanced. But as we've seen in the legislature, even as recently as last week, it doesn't take much for them to quickly pass something, gutting and replacing a bill and so on. So hopefully you'll stay with us and go to thecentersquare.com, subscribe, get the latest on Illinois, and stay there because we'll constantly updating stories every day. So hopefully you're able to plug yourself in and find out what's going on with your tax dollars in the state of Illinois. But stay tuned, because coming back, we will get to the latest in litigation against Illinois' gun ban and a whole host of other headlines, not just from Illinois, but across the country. So that's coming up next here with Bishop on Air. The state of Illinois requesting a delay in getting their experts together for the case challenging Illinois' gun and magazine ban in the Southern District of Illinois Federal Court, and the judge granting and denying in part that request. I'm Greg Bishop. Thanks for hanging out. It's Bishop on Air. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, bringing you the latest on gun ban litigation. And let's go right to it with the docket for the Southern District of Illinois federal case, where you've got Judge Stephen McGlynn handling this. And we've tracked this all the way from whenever Governor J.B. Pritzker enacted the ban on semi-automatic firearms, magazines over certain capacities, and a gun registry. That was in January of 2023. A few weeks later, flood of lawsuits in state court and federal court. In federal court, you had lawsuits in the Southern District consolidated. In the Northern District, you had lawsuits challenging it. These are in district courts, and there were different outcomes on preliminary measures, initial requests to have some kind of action before they get to the merits. In the Northern District, you had several cases challenging not just the state's ban, but also Cook County, Chicago, and Naperville's ban. Judges in the district federal courts said that the state had a likelihood of succeeding on the merits, which again was on a preliminary request for them to say, okay, we need some kind of relief now. Are you going to give it or not while we deal with the underlying issues? Northern District courts said that the state had a likelihood of succeeding. In the Southern District courts, Judge Stephen McGlynn out of East St. Louis, he consolidated 4 different challenges against Illinois' gun ban. On a preliminary issue back in late April last year, he did grant a preliminary injunction, meaning that the law was put on hold until it was dealt with. And then you had 6 days of what the gun rights community called Freedom Week, and that led to more people going out and buying semi-automatic firearms. At that time, if you recall, we talked to some gun stores that said they had the busiest week in quite some time. But then after 6 days, the state went to the appeals court, the 7th Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals, and got a stay on that injunction. The stay, what that means is it pretty much reverses it while they deal with it in the appellate court. So they reversed the injunction with a stay, and then they dealt with it in the appellate court, even though people were requesting the U.S. Supreme Court to step in the middle of the case to deal with this. The U.S. Supreme Court did not take those cases up at that time. So you have the Southern District of Illinois awaiting for the appeals court to come to a decision. The appeals court, I believe it was late August, did come out with their decision, ultimately saying the state had a likelihood of succeeding on the merits. So that kicked the merits back to the Southern District federal courts, where Judge Stephen McGlynn said he's not waiting around and they're going to deal with the merits on this case. And that's where we're at now with the Southern District of Illinois docket. So let's go back a bit just to look here. You had a hearing that happened. The judge came out in April and laid out some deadlines and said no later than May 10th, which is just around the corner. The issue for a scheduling conference and submitting their expert reports, again, May 10th, that's 2 days away from us. And then it says parties shall carbon copy the court. Follow-up status conference will be held on May 16th. All right. So that was the last month whenever Judge Stephen McGlynn issued that entry on the docket. Then you had a couple of things happen just in by way of the process. An attorney withdrew from the National Shooting Sports Foundation, so that was ultimately granted to be terminated from the case. Some procedural stuff. But then you get to May 3rd. So last week, the states, they motioned for an extension to file expert reports. All right, so this is something I think that a lot of people in the space of litigating against gun laws finds that state actors do. They request a delay. They request things to be slowed down. Here we are, a year and a half or so after a gun ban was enacted, and people say their rights have been injured. You have the states continuing to ask for delays in addressing this. So back to the docket, the states' motion to extend. Let's go ahead and take a look at that really quick. Motion to extend deadline for expert reports says that defendants, Attorney General Kwame Raoul, Governor J.B. Pritzker, State Police Director Brendan Kelly, by and through their attorney, Kwame Raoul, they moved to pursue for suspension of the May 10th deadline to provide experts' reports until after the close of fact discovery. Then they go through and they spell out why they're looking for that delay. Then you had the response from the plaintiffs. They came in and plaintiffs, Federal Firearms Licensees of Illinois, Gun Save Life, Gun Owners of America, Gun Owners Foundation, Piasaw Armory, Deborah Clark, Jasmine Young, Chris Moore, collectively FFL plaintiffs. Goes through the others for the Barnett case, the Illinois State Rifle Association, Second Amendment Foundation, and so on, by and through their attorneys. They say May 3rd, defendants requested a suspension of the May 10th, 2024 deadline for parties to exchange written reports until sometime after the close of fact discovery. Plaintiffs take no position, they say, regarding defendants' request. Plaintiffs will be prepared to comply with the court's May 10th deadline. However, so as not to unfairly prejudice plaintiffs, should the court grant defendants any extension of time to extend expert reports, plaintiffs respectively request a commiserate extension, meaning they also want to have an extension if the state gets an extension. So there you have the response. But then if you go back to the docket, you'll see that the judge did indeed issue an order here. And I'll just read that to you. It says, before the court, motion for extension of time to file expert reports filed by defendants. The defendants request the deadline for the exchange of expert reports to be delayed until 30 days after the close of fact discovery, or in the alternative, request a 30-day extension on the deadline to file an expert report. Who's urgent leave for unknown duration, and that's one of their experts, Martin Schreiber, I guess is how you pronounce that. But the plaintiffs, they filed a response stating they take no position. All right, so the pending motion for extension is granted in part and denied in part. The governor's request to delay the disclosure of expert reports until after the completion of fact discovery is denied. The government's request for a 30-day extension of the deadline to file Dr. Schreiber's reports is granted in part. This report shall not be due prior to the May 16th status conference. The court will take up this matter at that time. Signed, Judge Stephen McGlynn. So that's the latest in the case challenging Illinois' gun and magazine ban in the Southern District Federal Court. Still going to have the May 16th status conference. We'll see if that's going to be open court or via Zoom, and how that's going to play out. I will tell you that likely that is a session day where both chambers are expected to be in session. So I'm going to be tied up at the State House, but we'll do what we can to get updated on that case moving forward in the Southern District of Illinois. So clearly there's still moving pieces when it comes to challenging the state's gun and magazine ban. But things going on elsewhere across the country. You have a bill banning bump stocks and creating an electronic gun sale registry came up short in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives on Tuesday. And my colleagues over at the Center Square, Pennsylvania, Kristen Smith, writing that bills banning bump stocks and creating an electronic gun sale registry came up short in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives Tuesday. The proposal failed by one vote amid a narrowly divided lower chamber after critics said both violate the Second Amendment and, in the case of bump stocks, duplicate federal law. So interesting to see that happen in Pennsylvania. Not the only thing happening across the country when it comes to gun legislation. You've got the NRA claiming victory in Colorado as a ban on semi-automatic firearms apparently is now dead for this legislative session in Colorado. The NRA's executive director saying it's a victory for hunters, competitive shooters, and Coloradoans who want to protect themselves and their loved ones with the firearm of their choice. So yet another headline there for those in Colorado. But you have other things as well, including the gun control lobby talking about banning ghost guns. They say that in Vermont, a measure passed 110 to 31 in the Vermont House and 26 to 3 in the Senate. The gun lobby tried and failed to block the legislation that'll stop the deadly flow of ghost guns into our communities, they said. So clearly the efforts in other states still moving right along in trying to control firearms. Here's another gun control advocate talking about a bill, this one in New York. It would be the first of its kind in the nation, according to Everytown, where they're looking to essentially block pistols that can be modified to fire like machine guns. So another filing here, and this one from Bearing Arms, a pro-Second Amendment publication. This is a ban on convertible pistols, is how they characterize it. So clearly, you've got New York looking to pass these types of laws. And even Hannah Hill with the National Association for Gun Rights saying, every time I think New York's gun laws can't possibly get worse, they go and file something like this. This is the state whose gun law brought us the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association v. Bruin case, and they're doubling down on their absolute defiance of both Second Amendment and the Supreme Court. So, again, just some of the things happening across the country when it comes to Second Amendment issues. And even in North Carolina, gun owners call on lawmakers to pass constitutional carry. Another story there from Bearing Arms. So a lot happening across the country when it comes to the Second Amendment, and something I think is worth touching on from time to time to give you not just what's happening in Illinois, but also broader picture nationwide for some of the things that are happening across the country in the Second Amendment space. So there you go. Hopefully you are informed on that perspective of what's going on with the latest in not just Illinois. There has been some movement in other legislation or litigation against various gun laws. You've got the case still pending challenging the state's firearm industry liability law that says that firearms companies can be sued for advertising to kids or for allegedly making communities less safe with their products. You still got, of course, the city of Chicago suing Glock using Illinois' law on that. But you also have the case that's challenging the FOID card and some interesting things happening there. We'll have to unpack a bit more in the future here with Bishop on Air. So appreciate you taking the time with us each and every weekday morning with Bishop on Air. Let's go through some things that have happened in Illinois in the past 24 hours or so since we last talked. And again, go to thecentersquare.com where you can see all of the news that myself and my team from the Center Square bring you. And please do check it out and donate. All right, if you like the work that we do, you can click that donate button at the top of the page and make a donation. You can also sign up for the newsletter and so on. So let's take a look at some of these headlines here, and we'll reflect on a few of them. One in particular, the governor dismissing the reports that we talked about yesterday from Politico that his family's funding pro-Palestine groups. And here's some of what the governor had to say when asked by Katrina Peterson to respond to that Politico report, which spelled out, even with a correction, all these different elite liberal groups that are giving money to certain groups that ultimately give money to, college campus protesters protesting the war in the Middle East. Here is the governor being asked that question.
That's a completely false story. I think you should go read the Rolling Stone story that came out after it, which debunks all of the Politico story. Yeah.
So clearly there's, the governor denying that his family members are giving money to certain types of groups. And if you go read that story, you can get more information. Again, go to thecentersquare.com. Other headlines to touch on here before I get out and have to go back to the Capitol to cover another fun-filled day. Legislation would allow more government oversight on hemp products. And this is actually an interesting one because several weeks ago you had a group come out from the cannabis business groups saying that convenience stores in Illinois are selling Delta 8 infused products that look like traditional candy or snacks, and they're sold at convenience stores, and they claim that kids are able to buy these with no, ID check. So they wanted to essentially ban that entirely and go after the hemp industry. The cannabis business, right? And in Illinois, marijuana, cannabis, it was legalized for medical use years ago. And then at the beginning of 2020, it was legalized for recreational use. Getting a license to not just grow or transport, but to sell cannabis in Illinois has been an uphill climb for a lot of people. There's equity that's built into the licensing, but even those in the minority communities say that they're still being frozen out. It's very expensive. You got to give the state a whole bunch of money first up, and then the taxes alone and all the regulations there are from the number of cameras they have to set up and the duration that they have to keep security camera footage and all of the other ins and outs of operating a cannabis business. But when it comes to hemp, hemp was essentially legalized with the 2018 Farm Bill, allowed people to grow hemp for a variety of reasons. And those hemp farms, they have to be tested randomly by inspectors. And if they find a certain level of THC in the hemp, which hemp naturally has a lower level of THC than marijuana, the sister plant to cannabis. But the hemp products like CBD have proliferated all over the place. And CBD being said to have helped people with inflammation, helps people sleep, helps people relax, but it doesn't give you that high that cannabis apparently provides. So the CBD market is rather large, and that's a derivative of hemp. You can also get CBD from cannabis, but hemp's another area where people have found, hey, we can go ahead and produce this. So the hemp industry in Illinois now is looking to be regulated. It was an interesting news conference with legislators and advocates saying, we want to be regulated. The hemp industry wants to be regulated and taxed accordingly so that they can, ultimately be above board and so on. So you can read that story there as well. Another story, we talked about this yesterday with Tom Homan, former Trump official, talking about deportations if Trump gets elected. And you can check this story out. And if you missed that interview with Tom Homan, you can also watch that on this YouTube channel. But, a few highlights that once we get past that ad, a few highlights you'll be able to see at the article here. Former Trump official tells Illinois to get out of the way of deportations. So clearly, there's some interesting things that were said in as far as what is a migrant? Are they asylum seekers? What about the state's sanctuary state status? Let's hear a little bit of the governor from last month, and then Tom Homan from this program yesterday. And let's go.
Bill, a law that went into effect before I became governor, signed by the prior governor, is what's in.
And he's talking about the Trust Act that says that state and local law enforcement cannot assist federal immigration authorities in enforcing immigration law.
The Trust Act, which is a law that went into effect before I became governor, signed by the prior governor, is what's in place in Illinois. And essentially the idea here is that someone who is living here who's been undocumented and may have been here for years, getting pulled over because they were speeding, should not be a reason to now pull somebody out of their car, arrest them, and send them to ICE at the federal level and have them deported.
In Chicago and Illinois, you need to get the hell out of the way, because we're going to do it. And it just means, other law enforcement is a false multiplier. We don't have to send a bunch of agents there to do the job, but if they're going to play that game and not cooperate. And you know what? We just send more agents, an unlimited amount of agents to Illinois to do the job. If we can't get a force multiplier, if they think we're going to not do it, they're wrong. If they think we're not going to show up, they're wrong. Because in the Trump administration, look, there will be an historic deportation operation. Why is that? Because we got historic illegal immigration. Where I just explained, 9 out of 10 of them will be ordered removed.
So clearly a lot of back and forth still on the issue of the impact of migration. So that's another story you can go and check out at thecentersquare.com. So I'll be, again, tracking a lot of what's going to happen at the State House. You've got immigration advocates that plan to rally outside the State House with a news conference this afternoon. You've got the House and Senate coming back in. You've got a push from legislators and gun control advocates to free up $140 million for combating violence of different types. And some of the conversation there could be part of the budget negotiations. So go check out this headline again at the Center Square. Advocates, legislators push for $140 million to fund violence prevention. The Reimagine Public Safety Act calls for a comprehensive approach to reducing violent crime through targeted community investments. Advocates want that money to help pay for things like violence interruption, people who go and wear certain colored vests on the streets and they go and advocate. Katrina Peterson, reporter at the Center Square, went and talked with the director of research for target area development and reentry, Edward McBride, and State Representative Brad Halbrook go back and forth here separately, talking about the need for this money or whether or not it's even effective.
We're trying to fund our RPSA Act, which is Reimagine Public Safety Act. It has been proven, so the dollar amount I'm not too sure of exactly right now. I believe it's around $140 million, I believe. But essentially, this has been a known factor to bring down the crime in the city, around the state, really. We're looking at a 40% drop in the city of Chicago with the gun violence. It has been numerous programs that have been implemented with this funding, and we want to permanently fund this so that this doesn't go away. So the Peacekeepers are part of the FLIP team, especially in Chicago. I can speak on them because we work with them at target area. These individuals are the ones in the community actually keeping the peace in the community, right? So we notice that you have your outreach, which are the people that were post-incarceration coming out and working on the street. And then now the Peacekeepers are the ones that actually are the newer generation of the youth, and they're actually in the streets and they can keep the peace amongst everyone in the hot spots that we call them. You know that with us showing out a big crowd like this in Springfield, we're able to show them that this is really taking effect in the community and it's really affecting a lot of people. So it's, if you get support, bills are going to get passed. Legislators are going to see that, if you put a face to what you're passing, it's more personable for them.
Late last spring, early summer, there was an initiative, several $1 million for some peacekeepers in Chicago. And the numbers that I continue to see coming out of Chicago is crime continues to increase. So I'm not sure how these measures that we spend tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars on, I'm not sure how that's helping.
So again, the question of would $140 million going to peacekeepers actually keep the peace? Certain crimes are down in Chicago, but robberies and vehicle thefts are up dramatically from the last numbers I saw. So will that ultimately help, or will it just be more money for not much gain? So again, go to thecentersquare.com, check out all these headlines and more, and you'll be able to read up and stay informed as to what's going on at the State House in real time, as we have boots on the ground in Springfield, which is where I got to head off to and take care of some business and keep track of what's going on. So appreciate you guys being here each and every weekday morning with Bishop on Air. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Shout out to those who are in the chat room this morning: Festus, Titus, Tenebris, AS3, SXP, Radar Wolf. Say that 12 times fast. Roseanne, Nakuda, Dr. Fark, Dangerous Liberty. Who else we got chiming off here? Warsaw, good morning. Rawhide, and more. Sean, good morning. Jay Thomas, good morning. All right, guys. I'm going to get out of here, do my thing. See you back here tomorrow with Bishop on Air.